Dear students, the topic of our discussion today is the famous short story Bliss by Catherine Mansfield. As you know, Catherine Mansfield took birth in the year 1888 and she died in the year 1923. She took birth in New Zealand and she was considered as the central figure in modernism. As you know that modernism enacted or modernism actually came to existence from 1910 onwards, and ultimately all the features of modernism are considered to be present in the writing of Catherine Mansfield. Catherine Mansfield's short stories, as you know, these are famous in its own ways, as in her writing we can find the revolutionary use of the short story form. As you know that the short story is actually being considered as important for the modern period because it actually carried the basic trends and tendencies of the novels, and then with a particular kind of a shortage of time, the new genre short story actually came into existence. Now, when it was the matter with Catherine Mansfield's short story, we find that her focus was on the internal states and her impressionistic style. As we know that after the Victorian period, when there was a particular kind of a shift from the Victorianism towards modernism, it was a changing tendency from the realistic output towards something that actually focuses towards something internal. That means from external to the internal. So that's why with the basic orientations of Catherine Mansfield and also the other writers who actually focused on the psychological aspects of the characters or psychological aspects of the human beings in general, we find that a shift from the outside world towards the inside world, from the outside society, from the kind of a tussle and the conflicts that are going on within the mind of the characters are taken into consideration. So that's why it has been mentioned here, as you see, that regarding her contribution to the psychological short stories. Okay, she is considered to be related to the style of other famous writers like Virginia Woolf and James Joyce. Now, fundamentally, as you can see, that Woolf and Joyce, they're famous for their psychological novels generally. Okay, and at some times it is being considered as the stream of consciousness novel. But in case of the short stories also, as you know that Virginia Woolf wrote The Room of One's Own, and at the same time there you can find the short story that is Mark on the Wall was also being written by her. And at another time you see that James Joyce's short story Araby, it is also famous, that actually deals with the psychological crisis of an adolescent boy. Now, with that particular advent, we can think about Catherine Mansfield altogether. Catherine Mansfield, the short story collections that are ascribed to Catherine Mansfield, they are in a German pension that was published in the year 1911. Bliss and the Other Short Stories, from where our text, that is Bliss, has been taken. It was published in the year 1920. Garden Party and Other Stories, it was published in the year 1922. The Dove's Nest and Other Stories, it was published in the year 1923. And Something Childish and Other Stories that were published in the year 1924. Along with Bliss, we find the other famous short stories that are written by Catherine Mansfield, and these were like Prelude, The Garden Party, Miss Brill, The Doll's House, and obviously The Fly, as you can see. So with that particular thing, we have to move towards the text Bliss. As you know that Bliss is a story that is primarily focused on the central character. Her name is Bertha Young. Okay, so Bertha Young is considered here as the protagonist. She is a young woman who feels an inexplicable sense of bliss. There you can find the other characters like Harry. Who is Harry? Harry is the husband seemingly quote-unquote perfect husband of Bertha Young. There you will find the character Pearl Fulton, who is very significant and very important character in this particular story, Bliss. She is considered as a cool, enigmatic guest at her dinner party who is actually present there, and she is considered to be one of the most important characters of this particular text. Along with these three major characters, that means Bertha Young, Harry and Pearl Fulton, you will find there are other characters who actually came into that dinner party. The Norman Knights, who are about to start a theater and who are related with the interior decoration. Then you can find another character whose name is Eddie Warren, okay, who is a writer actually. Along with them, you will find there is a maid servant and also the nanny who is present in this particular short story. Now, I am not going to deal with the story matter of this text in detail because that you will do obviously. But I have to say a few words on it. As you see, the title of the story is Bliss. So fundamentally, the question certainly arises, what do we understand by the term bliss here? Okay, you will find from the very beginning that Bertha Young is in a blissful state that she considers at the very onset of this text. She feels that everything is well ordered, everything is according to her own choices, and if the situation, the atmosphere, the characters, everything is up to the brim. Okay, that fullness and up to the brim, that particular scenario, that particular consideration or concept is being posited through some symbolic outpourings within this particular short story. Bertha Young, as we see, that she is a mother, but somehow she cannot control the motherhood in terms of the relations between herself and her child. At the same time, she keeps a kind of a good relationship between Harry and Bertha, as you see, but ultimately that particular relationship will be, it will be questioned, it will be interrogated at the end of this particular short story. The kind of relation that she possesses with the Pearl Fulton, the main character, the another main character of this text, it is also being questioned towards the end of the story. And at the same time, you will find the kind of relationship that she wants to continue with the friends, okay? Like the Norman Knights and Eddie Warren and also others. These are actually propagating the basic concept that Bertha Young is altogether trying to keep a kind of a blissful state or the blissful relationship, or everything should be in well order and well proportion. She tries to do so, but what happens at the next? You will find that she actually throws a party. It's a dinner party, and Norman Knights and Eddie Warren and Pearl Fulton, they actually came as the party guests. Somehow in this particular scenario or in this particular text, you will find that along with the kind of relationship that it actually shows, you will find a question is being asked that whether the psychological state or the psychological condition of this central character, that is Bertha Young, is quite good or not. What happens there? Okay, that is the fundamental focus of this particular text. You see that along with the text, or when we'll go with the text, we find that the characters, that is Bertha Young and Pearl Fulton, the relationship between these two women, these are being underscored, and at the same time they have been questioned, because these are actually hinting towards a kind of a lesbianism, and at the same time the female sexuality that have been posited, not directly, not overtly, but inertly by Catherine Mansfield here. But at the end, we will find the kind of blissful state that she actually carried within. That blissful state is also being questioned at the end of the text. Why? Because we can find at the end of the text, there is a particular hint towards the kind of a relationship that is going on between Pearl Fulton and at the same time Harry, that is the husband of Bertha Young. So the questions will be there, and I am not going with the text or the story matter of this particular text. You will go with on your own, and we will move towards the key themes or the major aspects of this particular text. You see what it says. In the key themes or the major aspects, I have pointed out some 4 points, as you can see. The first one is the fragility of bliss. What does it mean? You see, the title of this story is Bliss. You see, so the blissful conditions or the blessed conditions that Bertha Young is actually possessing within her. The question is, whether that particular blissful condition will be sustained or not. So that's why it's a kind of a fragile condition. You see, the story critiques the superficial happiness and shows how Bartha's bliss, you know, the quote unquote bliss that have been pointed out here, is self-delusional. That means what she considers as the blissful state, what she considers as the blessed condition where she is in, whether these are delusional or whether these are actively or actually being propagated by others also. Okay, so it is based on an idealized and incomplete view of her life. So that's why, as you know, that there is a proverb often run that ignorance is bliss. So is it being considered that somehow the blissful situation where Bartha Young is present at the very beginning and almost till the end page of the story, is it a kind of a ignorance that she considers to be blissful? And when in place of ignorance there arrives the knowledge, what actually happens? Will the condition of the bliss is shattered, where the fragile bliss will be completely being broken or torn apart? So these are the questions or the things that actually taken into consideration in this particular text. So that's why you will find the term bliss is ironically used here. Towards the end of the story, you will find that the concept of bliss will be completely being shattered, and ultimately the ignorance has been converted into knowledge, and the last few lines of Bartha Young, that what will happen next, how will I consider or continue such a kind of relationship that I am possessing at this moment, these kinds of uncertainty is actually underpining or rather it is questioning the concept of bliss that have been turned towards the end of this particular story. But another aspect that I have to point here, it is the typical identity crisis of a woman. You see that Catherine Mansfield is always depicting some of the aspects of the female identity. In a typical patriarchal society where the females have been completely being subjugated and controlled and to some extent being dominated by the representatives of patriarchy, the female conditions are always being questioned by the typical feminist, whether it is the first wave feminist or the second wave feminists of different countries. Now what happens, that as you just progress with the story, as you just go with the story, you will find that along with the situations that have been creeping in, you will find the typical identity crisis that Bartha is actually facing. Bartha attempts to define herself, Bartha attempts to define her relationships through her own subjective experiences, but this internal world is at odds with reality, as you can see. Okay, you find that Bartha is at one point Bartha is to be considered as a wife of Harry. Bartha is considered to be the mother of the child. Bartha is considered to be a woman who is completely being attached with another woman, and the kind of the social relationships that have been completely being gathered. Everything is actually positing the very crisis that Bartha is in. So therefore it is actually referring to the identity crisis. And ultimately you will find that somehow it is not simply the identity crisis, rather it is to be considered as an existential crisis that Bartha is actually facing. So that's why you will find that another term is being introduced here, that is the term of alienation. Okay, the disconnect between Bartha's rich inner world and her emotionally hollow external life. There you can find the particular kind of an alienation is being posited. She is surrounded by people, but she feels a profound sense of isolation towards the end of the story. Another thing that I have pointed out here, it is the female sexuality. Okay, the relationship between Bartha and Pearl Fulton, it is obviously being underscored and pointed out by different critics in different era differently. Okay, the gender criticism and at the same time the lesbianism is always being incorporated here, and they are considering that somehow it's a kind of a it's a kind of a homosexual relationship, okay, or lesbianism that is in work. So somehow the kind of feeling, it is not overtly being described here as you see, rather you will find it is inertly or somehow it is obliquely being posited, the kind of relationship, the kind of feelings and the kind of the conditions that Bertha is actually facing when she faces Pearl Fulton, when she sees Pearl Fulton. Okay, I'm just reading a particular section where this particular kind of a homosexuality is being shown, as you see. Bertha says, no, not at all, said Bertha. Come along. So it is at the position when actually Pearl Fulton is arriving. And she took her arm and they moved into the dining room. What was there in the touch of that cool arm that could start blazing the fire of bliss that Bertha did not know what to do with? At another point, Bertha's references have been taken. I believe this does happen very, very rarely between women, as you see. Okay? Never between men, thought Bertha. But while I am making the coffee in the drawing room, perhaps she will give a sign. So the question is, what kind of sign? What she actually meant by that, she didn't know. And what would happen after that, she could not imagine. So these are the words that are actually incorporating or actually being showing that somehow some kind of attachment, some kind of, whether it is psychological or emotional or it is indicating towards some sexuality, these are kept open-ended here. As you see here, that some literary techniques have been incorporated with this particular story. You will find the stream of consciousness, because what is going on within the mind, within the consciousness of the famous central character Bertha is at the prime focus of this text. The narrative is largely told through Bertha's unfiltered thoughts and perceptions, providing a window into her mind. You will find there are obvious references of symbolism, okay? And symbolism, say for example, the pear tree. The pear tree is considered to be the central symbol of this particular text. So you see that the rich symbolism of the pear tree, which mirrors Bertha's state of mind, okay, the full blossom, the silver, when it is struck by the moonlight, and the silver fruit of the pear tree, it all symbolized her idealized but ultimately naive view of life, you see. But along with the symbolism of the pear tree, you will find there are ample references of the color symbolism, you see. Like the black cat and the grey one, and at the end the same thing has been also been incorporated. The kind of, the vibrant colors that Bertha is using while decorating the dishes, at the same time while just decorating the drawing room. So everybody will find that the color, that means the full color, and then it turns into black and white and grey. All these are actually incorporating the basic psychological aspects of the characters, you see. Another thing that I have mentioned, it is the irony, as you see. Irony is altogether to be considered as very significant in the story, as I have already been mentioned, that the title of the story is Bliss, so somehow you will find that the title itself is ironical. The dramatic irony is central to this particular story. The reader often perceives the tension and impending doom of that Bertha in her state of bliss is oblivious to. So she cannot identify what is actually happening in front of her. So that's why the blissful state is actually being considered to be something, ignorant or ignorance. And such an ignorance can prefigure a kind of, illusion towards the central character, towards which she will obviously feel disillusioned at the end of the story, and such a kind of a bliss, quote unquote bliss, is completely being shattered or broken. Then I have to move towards the last section, that is the questions, or the major questions and topics that I have listed here. You see that these are the topics, these are the questions that you should follow. The first one is bring out the ironic significance of the title Bliss that I have mentioned just now. Comment on the use of irony and symbolism in the story Bliss. Okay, so the symbols, you have to list them out, and the type of irony that have been used here. Analyze the character of Bertha Young in the story. So you have to refer to the feminine sensibilities and the female conditions in the society and her positions differently as a wife, and what happens at the end as a mother, and what happens when the nanny is actually controlling the child and taking the baby away from Bertha. So everything has been taken into consideration, the identity crisis and the alienation, obviously. Consider the story as a narrative of quest and unfulfilled desire. As you see, the kind of mental support, the kind of mental desire or desire at the mentalistic level, the quest that Bertha was actually possessing at the time, what actually happens at the end of the story, and whether there's remained unfulfilled or not. So here also you will have to identify the mental and psychological aspects of the character Bertha Young. Comment on the theme of female sexuality as reflected in the story Bliss. Obviously I have mentioned all these things. Comment on the role of Pearl Fulton in the story. So you have to deal this thing in detail. You see that Pearl Fulton, how she has been posited, how Bertha is actually treating her, how Harry is, a kind of, polluted mind of Harry, and at the same time the hypocrisy that he is actually carrying, and what happens at the end of the story. Everything has to be taken in consideration. Comment on the theme of infidelity and deception. It is also being associated with the postmarital affairs and these kinds of things, and the deception, the infidelity, and these kinds of references have to be taken in consideration. So these are the things that you should do. Just go with the text and try to identify all the themes and all the questions that have been mentioned, the topics I have mentioned here, and obviously it will help you to answer properly in your exams. Thank you.